A behind-the-scenes look at how games are made and the people who make them. This is Game Dev Deconstructed. Hello and welcome to another episode of Game Dev Deconstructed. This week we're coming to you live from a panel discussion at Dallas Startup Week. The panel is titled Indie Game Studio Founders and features myself, Amir Rajan, and two moderators, Chirag Gupta and Courtney Garza. In this episode, Amir and I discuss how we got started coding, our influences, plans for the future, and a lot more. I'm excited for you all to hear from Amir. He is the creator of the iOS version of A Darkroom, which hit number 1 in the App Store. The game was originally created by Michael Townsend, and Amir reached out to him during a work sabbatical, asking if he'd be interested in having A Darkroom enhanced and ported to iOS. Amir covers the details of their deal in the talk, which you'll hear in a bit. I've learned a lot from him over the many coffees we've had these past 3 or 4 years, and I'm glad to be bringing some of that to you today. So, without further ado, here is the Indie Game Studio Founders panel from Dallas Startup Week. Okay, yeah, so I'm Nick Culbertson. I work out of this space, not as much as I used to because I have a daughter now, but whenever I first started working out of here, I was working on a game called Epic Orchestra, and that was sort of my first passion project in gaming, and I think probably from the start of it to completion, I did most of the work while I was in this space. Prior to making that game, I was doing mobile apps, and I continue to do mobile apps now. I run a meetup group in town that's called Dallas App Developers. We have over 2,000 members, so I recognize some people from that as well. And Dallas Society of Play is a local collective of game developers that I'm sure you'll hear me plug several times today. There's a really strong community of developers in town, and this is a great place to get plugged in, which is Chirag's motto. Yeah, so just to get a feel for who all's here, are most of you all developers? Who all's a developer? Okay, who all's into game development? Okay, awesome. So, well, you came to the right place then. I have learned a lot from a lot of the people that work here at Node who are also game developers. We've talked shop a lot. And I recently started a podcast, which I'm probably going to cross-post this on, for Game Dev Deconstructed. So I've learned a lot through those interviews, and I'm hoping some of that information can bring value to the people here who are looking to get further into game development. And that's me.
Awesome. Cool. All right, so my name's Amir. And I guess my current title is fractional CTO. I think that's what helps you get your underwriting through loan processing and stuff. Because apparently if you say game developer, they're like, I don't know about that. But if you say fractional CTO, suddenly they approve loans that you wouldn't necessarily be able to get approved for. But I do a lot of independent consulting across all disciplines of software, everything from just general app development and business development to corporate Fortune 500 software that you would see at any brick and mortar or battleship gray building. That part's nice and all, but what I really love, of course, is game development. So I'm the creator of the mobile version of A Darkroom. It's my personal adaptation to a web-based version of the game that came out back in 2013. I ported it to iOS, and it hit the number 1 spot in the App Store in 2014, April 13, 2014, at 11 p.m. I remember the exact time that happened. It became it was marked as one of the top 10 apps of 2014 by Apple. So it's received some notoriety there. 2016, I ported that to Android. It hit the number 2 spot. It couldn't beat Minecraft. It was close, but it didn't beat Minecraft. That happened on a day when I went to a career day for an elementary school. And I go to the career day and I talk about all the success I have. And then the first question I got was, did you make Clash of Clans? I'm like, no, I made A Darkroom. And then the second question was, did you make Minecraft? And I said, no, I made the game that's next to Minecraft. And then subsequently, there were questions about have I played Call of Duty along with other varying things. So if you want to really be humbled in your profession, go to elementary school and have them ask you questions about your career, and they'll set you straight pretty quick. But since the Darkroom, I've built out 4 other properties. Together, my games have accumulated about 3.5 million downloads to date, worldwide, and still growing. And I'm still building stuff in between my very, very fun, boring consulting work as a fractional CTO.
Let's give it up for So I thought it's really kind of a rare opportunity to get this kind of panel together, and I think it's really special to note that some of our own local app developers here in Dallas, like Amir, like Nick, have had such tremendous success on the App Store and in other marketplaces as well. And it's cool to know that that's happening locally. I think I see some folks here who might also be students, and there's also student groups. Is that SGDA? I was going to call you up. So SGDA is a great group as well. If you are a student, there's communities like that where you can get involved early and start learning some of these skills in terms of game development and start being part of that community. I think that's one thing I noticed about both Nick and Amir when I was sort of thinking who should I have on this panel, because I've seen both of them they take the time to give back tremendously to the community by sharing their wisdom with us here today, but also like Nick said, he hosts his own meetup, and that's partly a fun group to have, but it's also a new resource for up and coming app developers. So I think it's great that we have both of them here today, and next we'll kind of jump into let's go like kind of career angle first, and then we'll switch gears and kind of talk about their creative process. So the first question for both of you guys is, how did you start learning to code, like at the very beginning, or kind of what got you into coding?
Would you like to go first?
I'll go first. We'll do it. It's like
Yep.
I don't know what that's called. This order. So that's a question I like to answer. It started out, I was a musician in Nashville before making the move to Dallas, and at that point, just being a musician, a lot of my gigs were on the weekend, so that left me with the whole week kind of figuring out what to do. My wife was a paralegal at the time, so that meant I was at home playing Halo a lot. Which I didn't tell her about until much later. It gets bad whenever you get online with games to the point where people by their gamer tags. It's like, what's up, kill shot? It's like, hang on, my mom's calling. Anyways, but so at a certain point, I think my wife had got me an iPad, and I thought, I can start, dabbling to make apps with this. And at that point, there weren't as many resources online, but I think I looked for an app that was Nashville Numbers. And this app did not exist. Nashville Numbers, if you don't know, is how music is notated in Nashville in the studios. So I wanted this app for myself, and it didn't exist, so I saw a hole in the market. I thought, okay, I can make that app. I did make that app. It was not gangbusters. That's not why I'm here today, but it was a nice start of getting into app development and creating products. At first, whenever my wife would come home, it would be very small accomplishments, like, oh, look, I was able to put Hello World on the screen, And after a while, once she was coming home, then it would be like, hey, look, now you can touch a button and it'll play audio and it'll navigate to other views. And you just start building on that knowledge base. And you talked about people being giving with their time and knowledge. Early on, the people that were giving of their knowledge were young kids on YouTube. Basically like, okay, today we're going to learn to say hello world. And it was such a small thing, but it ignited something in me that music had, and where it was all about solving problems. And you solve these small problems, and then your imagination gets bigger and bigger, and you want to do more things. And eventually you get to game development. That's how all roads lead to game development with development. But yeah, that's how I got started coding.
Yeah, and it's just really interesting hearing, how I've known Nick for a long time now. I mean, it's been at least 3 or 4 years now. Man, we're old. But you know, I know about Nick's background and, you know, how he came into programming. And I guess from my perspective, I was more classically trained, for lack of a better term. So my first foray into anything technical with the computer was I got a CD with Wing Commander 3 on there. And I put it into my computer, and I didn't have enough space. So I asked one of my friends, I was like, I don't have enough space. You know, what do I do? And he's like, well, try the del command and look for big files. I ended up deleting Windows. So that was cool. But I was able to install Wing Commander because it was a DOS game, so that was also really cool. My dad really didn't like that. He was not happy with me deleting Windows. So he ended up getting a whopping 500 megabyte hard drive and putting it on the computer so I could then install Wing Commander and not delete Windows. So I learned DOS commands, and I was like, this is programming. I know how to code, and considered myself a hacker. And then obviously that's not what a hacker is, but that's kind of how it started. And I just continued breaking the computer, getting punched in the face, and then getting an upgrade. So it worked out, you know, just a little bit of trade-off there. But my first coding machine was an IBM Aptiva. It had a 2 gigabyte hard drive, and I think it was 133 megahertz computer, 133 megahertz computer. It cost $5,000, and we got the credit card and did the swipe, and I survived with that computer till like 98, and I got Windows 95 on there and Windows 98. But my experience with development from there was basically C++, Turbo C, going to the library because I didn't have the internet, and getting C++ for Dummies and, you know, all those varying books, and I just kind of lost myself in that world. And after that, I went to college. Went to UTD, got my degree, went into the corporate world, did that for about a good 7 years, and then I decided, man, this stuff, I want to build Wing Commander. This is, you know, the corporate world's nice and all, but I want to go back to building games. So then that's when I took my sabbatical and started building a darkroom, and you know, out of a little bit of work on my part and some good amount of luck, everything. The chips fell where they were supposed to fall, and I had a nice little success on my hands. But that was kind of how it started with my development.
So you kind of mentioned, both of you mentioned, obviously, how you started your first app, but would you attribute it, especially for someone with a child, would you attribute it to your firstborn child, essentially kind of learning all the kinks and kind of how you went into it and to developing your next one after that? Explain the whole process. You know, what was the first kind of motion to let you start creating that, and then what would you learn from it?
Yes. Well, it was very different if we're talking about first app versus first game, because creating an application takes a lot of work. I don't want to say that making an app is like an easy thing, but when you compare it to making a game, it is easy.
Really?
Yeah, because whenever you're creating a game, you're creating, 10 to 100 times the art assets. You're having to think of things like engagement and retention and gamifying like having a meta game within the game, something that is keeping people coming back. And so it was, whenever I was creating other apps, it was sort of a learning experience of throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. And that's a great approach. I recommend people who are getting into things to do exactly that. When it comes to game development, however, it's much harder. It takes a lot more time to throw things at the wall. And as a result, you put more of yourself into the project, and your identity starts to become more entwined with the thing you're creating. So if someone doesn't like my guitar tuner app I put out, it's a guitar tuner app. If they don't like the game I put out, that's 10 months of my life, man. I'm not into that.
So basically having a kid.
Yeah. It was kind of, and and I've worked, after you hear enough criticism for things and enough praise for things, you sort of start to build up your armor, and you don't take those things to heart as much. That's sort of a separate topic, but Amir can talk on that one very largely.
Yeah.
He has a much bigger target on his back because he has been much more notable in the game space. And also, Amir, more so than anyone, I used to say Amir is the most human developer I know. And by he shares his experiences. He's very transparent of what has worked and what hasn't worked, whereas for a lot of us, we're very guarded about those things. So the long-winded answer was creating apps, I was more open to the fail, learn, grow approach. But whenever it came to creating games, it took a little more time for me to realize what I'm creating is a product and not an extension of myself and my identity.
That's tough.
Yeah. And I echo the same thing that Nick talked about. So when it came to corporate development, whatever, right? If you didn't like what I built, or if it wasn't to spec, there wasn't much emotion involved with it. You just basically got some information. You had a manager that said, this needs to be done in 2 weeks, please get it done in 2 weeks. And you get it done in 2 weeks, and they come back saying, that's not what we wanted. And that just continues for 7 years. That was pretty comfortable from that perspective. And but when it comes to game development, or when it comes to any kind of creative endeavor, you end up putting yourself into your work. And the good part of that is that that's how you differentiate yourself. That's how you have a successful product, is because there's something novel. Even if the game mechanic itself isn't novel, the approach or the perspective that you put towards that product is novel in itself because it came from you, right? So it was really interesting when I built my fifth game. It's literally called Mildly Interesting RTS, and I was at GDC last year, and I was showing Mildly Interesting RTS to just a random person, and they were playing it and they liked it and everything. And then that evening, he emailed me and said, I really like the game. Here's some feedback. And he was like, add graphics, add XYZ, and all these like sound effects and particle effects and everything. And then I replied back and I said, that's not really my style. And he went and he finally took note of my name, and he replies like, holy crap, you're the guy that made a Darkroom. I've played your game, and I totally get why Mildly Interesting RTS looks the way it does, because that's totally a game that you would make. And so people get really familiar with your creative fingerprint. And so, when you get negative comments about it, it's really tough. It's really tough. I think, so to date, I think Darkroom's at 35,000 reviews. So it's got a 4.9 star rating. But the problem is that there's that other 0.1% that is not 5 stars. It's 1 star. And they're mean. Like, there's some really, really mean people out there. Initially when that happened, it was rough. Like, every review was just like, this hurts. But after the 1,000th 1-star review, you get kind of used to it, and you just don't worry about it too much because it's wasted mental effort to think about that stuff.
Everyone's gonna have trolls.
It's like
haters.
Yeah. And what are you going to do? And the other thing is one interesting thing that I think throughout that entire process one person told me something, and it really stuck with me. And I think that significantly shifted how I thought about the things I created and how I received criticism for those things. But he basically said that the world really is a beautiful place, and one of the things that makes it so beautiful is that different people can have different perspectives of a given situation, and both of them can be valid, right? So this person hated my game, and that is totally valid and totally fine. And this person loved it, and that's also valid. There's no right and wrong. It just is. And once you kind of accept that and try to stop trying to fight whether it's good or bad, and just say, I appreciate the perspective you gave. I don't appreciate the death threats that I've received, but outside of that, man, people get angry over a dollar.
Yeah, you mean like literally, right? Yeah.
Like literally, there was one 1-star review where someone was like, these guys, they created this scam app. It's like a text-based RPG, right? You see a text-based RPG at the number one spot. You don't expect that on like a mobile device with HD stuff and things. So yeah, he was like, I'm gonna come after you. I'm gonna sue your ass. And I was like, it's $1. Like, I'll give you the refund, man. Like, I'll PayPal it to you. But yeah, I mean, you just get a thick skin about it and just stop worrying about it.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, it's cool to hear some of these. These are real experiences that you may not have anticipated. That are going to happen once you launch something in the App Store, and now it's available for the whole world to interact with, and and now it's out there, and you just kind of have to learn from those experiences like you have. So thanks for sharing that. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned GDC. If you want to explain, there might be some new folks here.
Yeah.
Just talk about what is GDC and how do you go to it every year? Or are you
so GDC is Game Development Conference. They basically there's the expo, which is like 2 days, and then there's the pre-conference stuff, which is all the industry people coming out and presenting and doing all the workshops. So that's the part you want to go to, right? If you can spend the money and go to GDC, and if you're really, really serious about game development, that's where you make your networks for. And the presentations are good, but it's the networking opportunities that are really, really why you go there. And so one of the primary interactions I had were in the quote unquote after parties, where they actually had desks where you could sit there and code. So you would code at the after party. Perfect, right? It's wonderful. But yeah, so it's really
ago or so.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't able to go to that one because I picked up a fractional CTO contract, right? But yeah, it's generally a good experience. You definitely want to try it once, but you got to be serious about game dev. Right?
Yeah.
Where's the next one?
It's usually in California.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's usually in California, and it's around this time of the year.
I also wanted to say some of these like groups and events that we're mentioning are pretty good for any type of game developer, I would say. And by that I mean whether you're releasing games on the iOS App Store or Steam or other kinds of game marketplaces. I think these conferences, groups, Dallas Society of Play, GDC, etc., the Dallas App Developers Meetup, tend to be welcoming of all those, regardless of which platform that you're releasing on. So just something to keep in mind. If you're someone who's thinking about getting into game development and you literally don't know yet, are you going to be releasing it on Android, or is it going to be an Xbox game, computer game? What's it going to be? I think all these groups and events, I don't know, you guys can back me up on that, but that's what I would say. I think it applies regardless of what platform you're releasing on.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Darkroom, did you have any licensing issues with the creators or?
No. So I actually, we have a royalty agreement between us. So basically, he gets a percentage of any revenue that I've generated off of the game.
So you set that up before you even started?
Mm-hmm. The funny thing was that I just emailed him. I said, "Hey, man, I'm taking a sabbatical. I'm going to port this over, and I'm going to sell it for $1. And if we make any money, I'll split it with you." And he's like, "Yeah, sure." And that was it. Like, that was it. And the funny thing was, like, after the day one release, we got 30 downloads, so it was like nothing. And then month 2, maybe 1,000. Month 3, maybe 1,500. Month 4, 480,000 downloads in 1 month. It was pretty ridiculous, like just out of nowhere. And yeah, it was funny because he saw a transfer of like 7 digits, right, or 6 digits.
Yeah.
Go to his bank account. I was like, this was a good idea. And I'm like, yes, it was. The funny thing, or the unfortunate thing, was that the moment it went viral, clones started to come out. And the registered trademark, the international registered trademark process takes a year. So for me to take a clone down, yeah, I have a soft trademark, like a implied, like a TM trademark for my games and for the assets, and that has a little bit of teeth to it, but it's not a registered trademark teeth. But that's when we started the whole process to get our registered trademark, but it took a year. And like by then the damage is done, right? You've got clones out there that are, trying to wrap it or something and put ads and shill applications. And you try your best to stop it, but at that point you're throwing good money at bad money, and it just those are other growing things, right? You just don't worry about it. Eventually you're like, yeah, they cloned it, no big deal. I have a following. I have that quote unquote pedigree that people will follow. But yeah, so if your app goes viral, spend the time to trademark it, and then in a year you'll be able to take those.
But that was
clones
smart
back.
of you to ask it, because if you hadn't,
Yeah, that's a good.
Yeah, no, and that goes back to just I guess ethically just being a good person, just saying, I want you created something that I really took a draw to, that I connected with, and I want you to be a part of whatever I build, even if it's a whole lot of nothing, right? So I've never met him, by the way. He lives in Canada. I've never met the guy.
Oh,
Yeah,
So
I've never
maybe,
met the guy.
when in doubt, send the email. See what happens.
Yeah, I mean, it was like 2 sentences. Like, yeah, sure, go for it. I'm like, all right, cool.
Also, sort of segues to my next question, which is, we're here at Dallas Startup Week, and we're here to celebrate entrepreneurship. So I thought I'd ask both the panelists kind of how you see yourselves growing as entrepreneurs and learning kind of the business side as well. What are you doing proactively to make sure you're always growing as a business person as well? Mm-hmm. Or do you mostly see yourself as an artist? And, it's kind of a deep question, but take it wherever you want.
Right, but those two, and for me, those two are not. They don't have to be like you're one or the other. So I am an artist, but I'm also a marketing person and also a developer. With game development specifically, you have to wear a lot of hats, especially if you want to do it indie. And I've heard people before say that you should identify your strengths and then just ignore your weaknesses and outsource that stuff. Well, when you are an independent game developer, that starts cutting into your bottom line. And I know you started to outsource a little bit of development here and there, but for me, it's just so tempting to do everything. But the problem is that it helps you grow as an artist, it helps you grow as a marketing person, and I feel like I'm growing in all of these arenas, but it still takes just as much time, if not longer, when you're doing it by yourself, to get a product to market. And so that's the thing. The two things that I've tried to focus on this year is, one, marketing more, and that means just being more active. It doesn't mean I'm promoting my product. It means that I'm just more active online. If a friend posts something and it looks cool, I'll tell them it looks cool, because that is sort of building a relationship. Ali Mirza, who also works out of here, had a meetup with Chirag last year that was called Startup Marketing Hacks. And I've learned so much from him just about how marketing is really about building relationships. And I think my approach before with marketing things was just, the product is done, send out my tweet, and I'm done. And that's not the way it works, unfortunately. I will probably still continue to try that in the future, but I'm not expecting increased results. So there's that side of it. And the other thing is, I had a daughter. She's now almost 15 months old. And so last year was I was dad. So just transitioning to becoming dad. And I think at the start of this year, I have dedicated work hours now. Does anybody listen to Gary Vee by chance? Gary Vaynerchuk?
A little bit.
Yeah, so if you listen to Gary Vaynerchuk, you can't help but to become like this maniac, like super, I gotta crush it. So I started this year, I've been trying to crush it. Last year I crushed myself, and now I'm rebuilding to this point of being really proactive on all these fronts. But I think if you want to make it in the game development space, the same way I did in the app development space, I really want to get to a point where I'm throwing something new at the wall, ideally every 6 months. So putting out a new fully featured game every 6 months so that I can learn and grow from. And if it sticks a little bit, then I continue to update that product and grow from there. But that's, to answer your question, if that did answer your question, I'm focused on those two arenas, putting out more product and being more active in the ways that I market myself.
Awesome.
Cool. I have no idea what I'm doing most of the time. I think a lot of the, for lack of a better term, gurus. There's a bunch of like guru style stuff out there, and it gets really frustrating. Like seeing.
What do you mean by guru style stuff?
Guru style stuff, like you'll get the marketing, you'll get the quote unquote scummy marketing emails. I saw your website and I can increase your SEO by 28%, and it's like,
you got my email. This is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, you don't even know what I do. Like, yeah. So, and I think there's a lot of that disjointed, just disconnected portrayal of success that is just really, really hard to get. And I'll be the first one to say that most of the time I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea what I'm doing. But that being said, I think having strong relationships is a very important part of it. And it really comes down to just being honest. And when you made a connection with someone that is from an email that's actually genuine, try to what's it called? What's the word? Cater, curate, grow, cultivate. That's it. Boom. Try to cultivate those relationships, because they're the ones that are really, really important. And you never know when someone knows someone that knows a guy that knows a guy that can get you a introduction to someone. So that's the first part of it. Now, as far as like growing as an entrepreneur, I think it really comes down to once you're in a more of like a quote unquote inner circle than you once were, is to help those on that outer circle move inward. Right. I'm nowhere near anywhere. I have nowhere near the relationships to talk with Nintendo or Apple directly and get an automatic, thumbs up for your next game. Right. But I am closer to them. And it took a lot of work getting there, and now I'm around that boundary to help others come in. And what I've learned is that it's like that by design, from what I've seen. And you have to do the hustle. You have to get your communication and make your connections to get a contact with Apple, and then potentially work through that. I know, Nick, you had to go to like these places where they actually had Apple people, where you went there and you showed them Epic Orchestra and stuff like that. And you can't shortcut it. And if you get tagged as one of those people that shortcuts one of those things or life hacks it, I mean, you get blacklisted pretty quickly, and that gets around pretty quick. So helping people, being honest to where I don't end up in that situation.
So out of curiosity,
Sure.
it sounds like you both by and large work alone on your gaming projects then.
Yep.
And at least Amir, one of your long-term goals, it sounds like, is to move closer to a point where you could potentially make a big deal with a large publisher of some sort.
Yeah, or another angle to that, instead of like making a big deal, would be identifying those other indies that have really good titles, but they don't have the platform, right?
So my question then is, why do both of you continue to choose? It sounds like you both work alone on your teams. Why is that? What's going behind? What's your decision point behind that process and running the business almost solo? Can you speak to that? Does that make sense?
Part of it is that's the way that people start out, right? So I started out by building things myself, and even though that was the long road, that's the experience I have. Me building a product is a very different skill set than leading a team. But I've now gotten to a point where I do try to outsource a little bit of programming I've done, and then art. Art is something that is super easy to get someone else. You can pay to do that.
Yeah, and for me, it's more like collaboration. So it's not necessarily that I'm rarely working alone, but a lot of it's almost like a barter system, right? So sometimes it's an equity share for a specific app, like for one of my games, A Noble Circle. I have a guy in Brazil who's a composer that ended up doing all the composition of the music.
You gave away equity. So if I can reword my question, I suppose that's what I'm trying to ask is how do you go about collaborating? How do you go about finding people to offload code work or find artwork? And it sounds like you're giving off equity for some of your projects, which for someone with your brand, that's easy, but someone in my position.
Yeah, so the funny thing was that he emailed, his name is Raphael, and he emailed me back in 2014. He's like, man, hey, a Darkroom could really use some music. And I'm like, nah, it's just, it's a silent game. But we exchanged some, emails. He played through it and everything. And I was like, I'll keep you in mind. And then, it was 2016. I was like, hey, I got a game. You in for it? Immediately, I got an email. And it goes back to that cultivation of relationships, right? It took 2 years before I ever really emailed him. But when it happened, he replied back. And with a game, I mean, you could technically say, it was a big game, and I got that signal to noise ratio really, really well there. But if it's smaller and you still get an email, that's an even better connection, because not only did they find you, but they found you and then decided to follow up with, requesting a contact. So those are even stronger connections there. But if you can't do it through the internet, it's these local meetups and these connections that you build.
Yeah, the people that I've hired on things have been people that I know that I just met at meetups. And sometimes, like the guy who I hired to do programming, he'd never been hired as a programmer before. So I basically just asked him what his hourly rate was and then went from there. Same thing with artists. I use a lot of local artists if I'm going to do things. People that I already know their style, I know them personally, and we agree on a rate that's good. And what I like about that, as opposed to sharing equity of something, is that it feels more that I'm investing in myself. For a long time, any income that came into the business, I was not investing back into the business. It would have gone to living expenses. And I think at a certain point, probably after I had my daughter, I decided I just logistically can't do this all myself anymore. So I would start to hire people. And by going to meetups like Dallas Society of Play, you start to get a good feel for who has strengths that you don't have, that you can leverage. And a lot of times, because these guys, some of them are young and just out of school, some of them want to do it just because they want to work on something cool and help out a friend, they're more likely to do that stuff. If I were doing the same thing in just mobile app development, the cost would be something I couldn't do. Game development is such a craft of passion that people are willing to do it. I'm not saying take advantage of people, but I'm saying a going rate people are happy with to be working on a game. I think that threshold sometimes is a little bit lower for an independent person than someone who is, say, a Ruby developer. Like if I wanted to hire Amir for an hourly thing on a project, I couldn't do it. I'd be like, I don't pay myself that much,
I'd go broke.
So there are people who just want experience who are doing great work that you can find just through these local networks. And that's what I've tried to utilize. And it's another thing where it really does feel good, because that's another thing of bringing someone from one of those outside circles in, that then they get to take some ownership in this product as well. It's not like someone works on your game and you say, this person isn't a part of it, because that person that worked on your game can become a part of your marketing story for it.
So you list them in the credits.
You list them in the credits, and it helps to foster better relationships with those people too, and it's...
Trust goes a long way. Like I can't stress that enough. So trust really, really goes a long way.
A lot of time with game development, it takes a long time to get to the point where financially you have the rewards you want. So if along the way you can find out a way to celebrate other people's successes as they're your own, I think that's one of the keys to life, is to be able to have Amir do something great and I'm truly happy for him and not feeling like, I wish I made a dark room, And by being able to do that, it raises the sum. The sum is greater than its parts,
Yep.
And that's what these local communities are about. That I'm banging the drum for.
Yep.
So on that note, what are some of your inspirations? Like, what game developers, app developers do you look up to pull from inspiration, if any?
Yeah, okay, so this isn't pandery, but one of them is...
One of mine.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Wow.
Yeah. So before I created the game, that was actually my true passion project was Epic Orchestra. So it combined my interests previously, which is music. Like I did composing. I'm a musician. Whenever someone says, "What do you do?" I'm like, I'm an app developer. But musician is the first thing I think. And I think over coffee with Amir, he gave me the idea of sort of combining my two interests to create a product that only I could make. And that really resonated with me on a level to where the Apple TV was coming out. And so I wanted to create something that was specifically for that device. So I thought making a swipe-based music game where I made all the music seemed like it was a perfect fit. So Amir has been instrumental in that, and also in just his blog and the way he's been transparent with every approach of how he got featured on the App Store was really encouraging to me. And I don't know if I've told you this, but there are actually 2 or 3 separate examples I can think of people who have come to my meetup and talked to me after the fact and been like, I quit my job because Amir...
And I was like, don't do that.
No. But, it worked out for them. I think they didn't quit their jobs and become...
Please don't quit your jobs. Please.
Well, they didn't do it and then just start making a game. A lot of them were like, I'm already a developer. I'm choosing myself now.
Yeah.
And most of them have been happy with it, or if they're not, then they still have the skills where they can go back and do that.
Yeah.
One of the best things, Amir... The way that you framed whenever you left your job and started making game development, you said you were going on a sabbatical, which I just always have thought is so cool, because you don't think of someone, you think of a PhD doctorate person going on sabbatical, not someone who's leaving their 9-to-5 and then going to just, make a game because they want to, just for the fun of it. You didn't care if it was going to make money or not, So that he's one of my big influences. Just to rattle off a few more, artistically, I'm into this new 80s design stuff. So there's this guy named Signal Noise that I'm really big into. Indie Game, the movie that everyone who is, it's sort of rock-starified game developers. So it's on Netflix. I recommend people check that out.
There's a part 2 also.
There's part 2 also. And then also there's Tim Schafer from Double Fine Productions. They filmed like their production for a successful Kickstarter. Those have been big inspirations for me.
Yeah. So it's funny. I go back to that career day, and I go to the front desk of the elementary school, and they give you they take your picture and they print out a little thing, and then I had this little person escort me to the rooms where I was speaking. And he asked me, he's like, so what's your job? Like, what are you going to be talking about? I was like, I'm going to be talking about game development. It's like, that's cool. I have experience in games. And I'm like, how many years of experience do you have in games? He's like, at least 6 years of experience in games. But it's actually true. Like, so you think about the amount of experience you bring into a profession. I mean, I've been playing games since fourth grade. So you bring that experience across, and the games that really stuck with me are actually pretty recent. But But Journey is a beautiful game. It came out on PS3 first. There's another game called Flower. It's just very evocative. It was also a PlayStation game. Monument Valley. That's one of those games where I looked at that and I was like, I'm gonna quit because I will never make something this good. But it was really inspirational too. So I think those are the three like big games that really stand out and kind of have directed or defined the styles that I enjoy and that I work with. And it's going to be different for everyone, but just make sure when you look at these styles is that don't make the Flappy Dappy Bird just because someone else did it and it went viral. Please don't do that. There's very little success. There's very little success in that. Find your fingerprint, your style, and there will be an audience there that will like that, right? The more niche your game is and your style is, the better of a chance you have of retaining an audience that will stay with you through your subsequent games. And but yeah, those are the three primary games that I would say have really influenced my lens that I look through gaming through.
Awesome.
Yep.
And since it's about 4:50, so we have kind of blown through the hour pretty quick, but I know there's some questions in the audience as well, some more. So let's see if we can get maybe 2 or 3 questions from the audience, and we'll just, whoever's got their hand up, go ahead.
So, I see indie game development is very much an artistic process, and you're developers, you are artists. And do you find that people follow you as a developer like they would an artist, and they want to see what you're doing next, or like Justin Bieber, what's the next thing he's going to do? And is there something that you learn from that? Like to your point, when someone says you should do this, you're like, well, that's not my style. So how do you balance that where I'm going to be true to my style, but then trying to find what's the next thing people might want to play?
Mm-hmm. So for me, I think it's the one competitive advantage indies have over the AAA companies, is the ability to interact with your fans, the people that have downloaded your games, your customers, on a very personal level, right? Like you tweet out to EA, hey, get rid of loot boxes, right? You're not going to get anything, right? But you tweet to me, hey, I really liked your game, or I really didn't like this part. I'll have a conversation with you. And so that is a real competitive advantage, personally, I feel. And yeah, just be receptive to feedback, and be open to exploring. And your style will change over time, but it will still be you. So just do what feels right from that perspective, and take full advantage of the human aspect and the one-on-one aspect, and try to cultivate that.
One thing on that note is whenever it depends on how you're portraying yourself online, are you a studio or are you an individual? Because if it's under the pretense of this is my studio, it feels like all the other things that you're doing, you can't really share. So people who are downloading my games don't necessarily want to hear about my radio apps that I have out, but my radio apps are the core of what my business is. Right. So that's why I have transitioned just in this past year to sort of homogenize my feed to being both personal and business. So anything artistically I'm doing, I can put under that umbrella, be that an update to a tuner app, or if I'm working on a new game or anything. One thing that I did have to sort of fight against is, and I don't know if all developers have this tendency or if it was a personal thing of my own, is I tended to just jump in the development with the blinders on and I'm just solving the problems and not share the process. Yeah. And it wasn't until much later that I discovered that sharing these things as you're doing them and the process itself is art. So by sharing that and communicating that with people, it builds engagement. And so, yes, as an indie, you have more opportunities to do that, but we don't always take that opportunity. But it's a good practice to start sharing things early enough to where, you have something to talk about from day one. Even if it's just, hey guys, I have a new idea for a game I'm working on. Here are some of the ideas of titles that I have. Any of these sound cool? You know.
So the product is not just a game, it's also yourself.
Yes.
Yes. But at the same time, you have to know that it is a product and not a part of yourself, or else that can be a dangerous sort of thing, you know. Because if you are just creating a game for the sake of creating a game, that is fine, but you need to treat it like a business, you know.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Any thoughts on VR or directions you're going, AR, VR, anything like that, or console, whatever?
Yeah, so I'm excited about VR, like the prospect of where it's going. It was actually at Node. There's another developer here, Justin Lewis, who had given me Minecraft on the headset VR, which Gear VR. And so I would remember I was sitting right over there in that chair, and Austin was here. I don't know if you guys know Austin, but if you've ever seen him before, you will know him. So I was doing Minecraft, and I was lost in the woods, and I was like, oh, I want to get out in the open so I can look up at the sky and see what it's like. So I was there and jumping around through outside. Palms started to sweat as I'm trying to navigate my way in Minecraft to get into the wide opening. And so anyways, I got the worst motion sickness I've ever had, and I have not revisited the Oasis since that moment. And so I'm excited about the technology, but as far as myself as a player, I don't see myself going gung-ho for it anytime soon. And because that, I'm not totally compelled to sort of chase the market in that arena. AR, I think, is very fascinating. Business applications, I think, is where that's going to be most intriguing. Where instead of me having to have, you know, a computer monitor I'm in front of, maybe I can just put my phone into a dock and that becomes my computer screen anywhere I am. We already have the computational power in our phones to do those things. But that's where I'm most interested. For gaming, I feel like we're still in like the parlor trick phase. Certainly there are good applications that are doing it right now, but I'm more interested in how is it going to change the world in a business and personal computing sense.
For me, a part of me can't wait till where I can just download my brain into a computer and just I'm fully prepared to, when I get so old that I can barely move, to just go into a VR thing and just play EVE online and just just check out, right? It's like it's done. Bring on Ready Player One, basically. But as far as like the near term, VR is still very new. We're still learning the rules of what's the right way to even move a player so they don't get the sickness, and those the novelty and then actual real experiences, memorable experiences. It's just I don't think I'm there. I don't have the experience to really look at that. With regards to augmented reality, that feels a little bit better, and from the perspective of game development, I think AR is just that, an augmentation. So anywhere where you would be swiping or like touch dragging on a mobile device, think of just replacing that with moving the camera, getting closer and further away. So for some things it's horrible, but for other things where you have maybe like a very large map or a very large game that you're trying to explore, it becomes much more intuitive. So I could see some of those augmentations of games happening. And I'm going to treat it like that, AR like that, until I get more experience with it and try something a bit more risky.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we are right at 5. I love the questions, and all the handles for all the presenters and panelists up here are on the whiteboard here to my right. So you're welcome to follow them there on Twitter and engage and keep the conversations going. So yeah, let's give them a round of applause, and then we'll hear some last thoughts. Any final thoughts? What do you guys got?
Final?
Okay, yeah, so final thoughts. If you are here today and you're thinking about getting into game development, I highly recommend checking out Dallas Society of Play. It's a great group that's showing off how games are made and people just sharing their work, and it's a really cool community to get plugged into. The other thing is just some ideas if you are starting to make your own games is keep the scope really low. So don't try to make a big, huge game for your first thing so that you just sort of take baby steps into it. And also, if you can, try to think about what you want to build before you start coding on it. Too many times I've had feature creep set in on a project because I just start jumping in and solving problems without, starting with the end in mind. So those are my closing things. I hope some of you all will listen to my podcast, Game Dev Deconstructed, where we talk about a lot of the things we discussed today. And buy all the things. Buy all the things for independent game developers because it helps us to put diapers on our babies. Or buy doggy bags for your dogs, since you don't have babies yet.
Not yet.
That's it. Yes.
Not yet. Final thoughts. Yeah, just build something small. Build something very quick right away. It breaks my heart when I hear someone saying, "Yeah, I just started getting into game development. I've been working on my project for about 18 months now," and I'm just like, "No, don't do that. Don't do that. 1 month, get something. Just get something out there, and then use that to find your style, whatever that ends up being, and you'll get better at it, and you'll focus in and dial in into what you are in the context of a game." And aside from that, with regards to like supporting games, if you want to see really good games, you have to buy them, right? So purchase games, look at the editors, the actual App Store's editor list. They're really great games on there. Same thing with like the Steam games. Buy the games and play them from the context of studying and trying to understand them. And you have to do that. You can't expect someone to buy your game if you yourself are not going to buy games, right? So support your other indies and grow and learn from the style, from those things that are up there, because they're there for a reason.
All right, thank you all for sticking around.